He was the kind of boy who never looked twice at the people who kept his world in order. The kind of boy who'd step over a janitor's bucket, track mud across a freshly mopped floor, and still expect the hallway to sparkle when he came back from lunch. At East Creek High, he was known. Not for his grades. Not for kindness. For the way his name echoed, like a last name that bought silence instead of respect. The cleaner? She was just another shape in the background. No one learned her name. No one knew how long she'd been there. No one cared why she came early or stayed late. And certainly not him. So when he turned to his friends that day, their laughter loud, backpacks slung like trophies, and tossed his gum wrapper at her feet, it wasn't rage that showed on her face. It wasn't defeat either. It was a kind of stillness. Because while he laughed at her mop, she held the deed to the floor he was standing on. She held the pen that signed his tuition. And she had waited long enough. Before we continue, what country or city are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're watching from. Hit the like button and subscribe to enjoy more of our videos. At East Creek High, movement was constant. Sneakers slapped tile floors, lockers banged open and shut, and voices chased each other down corridors like they had something to prove. No one stopped. No one looked down. No one saw her. Naomi Okafor, hair tied back, sleeves rolled, hands wrapped around a chipped mop handle, glided through the noise like she didn't belong to it. She wasn't invisible because she hid. She was invisible because people chose not to look. She cleaned up their messes while they laughed about problems they didn't really have. Alex, front of the pack, always grinning, always loud, moved through that hallway like he owned the air. Friends flanked him on both sides, high-fiving, snatching each other's phones, tossing jokes like coins. They talked about the next party. The car his father promised. The freshman girl who smiled too long in second period. They never mentioned her. Never lowered their voices as they passed. Never wondered why her eyes looked tired in the morning and colder in the afternoon. That day, his shoe squeaked against freshly mopped tile. He stopped mid-laugh, and curled his lip. Still at it, huh? He didn't expect an answer. He didn't wait for one. He dropped his smoothie lid right where she had just cleaned. Then walked away. Behind him, the wheels of her mop bucket turned quietly. One hand on the handle. The other still holding something heavier than any mop. Before she ever touched a mop, Naomi signed contracts that closed million-dollar deals. Her name sat on title deeds from Georgia to Arizona. She didn't just own homes. She built them from concrete and strategy, brick and silence. By 40, she had walked through boardrooms where people didn't expect her to speak, until she did. Married a man who created an app the world couldn't stop using. Moved into a life that felt designed by blueprints instead of dreams. Then came Alex. The boy she didn't raise, but was now expected to shape. He called her Dad's wife when he wasn't ignoring her. He said she wouldn't understand what it felt like to be him. He said it with a mouth fed by her table. In a home paid for by her choices. Surrounded by walls that her hands helped build. She didn't yell. She watched. Watched him walk through life like everyone owed him space. Watched how he treated drivers, waiters, his teachers, the woman who delivered groceries. Watched how his father tried to buy change with summer camps and lectures. Naomi knew better. Understanding doesn't come in lectures. It grows in silence, when the world stops clapping for you. So one evening, while the house was quiet and the lights from her home office still glowed, she printed out a single sheet of paper. Folded it once. Tucked it into a drawer. And picked up a uniform no one had worn since the last shift ended hours before. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't ask permission. She just showed up. At East Creek High. With a mop. And a lesson. Alex never asked how clothes made it into his closet. Or how the water always ran hot. He was used to being surrounded, by noise, comfort, distraction. By friends who laughed too loud and adults who looked the other way. He walked through the world like someone who had never been made to stop. At home, he moved from room to room without knocking. Left plates on counters. Music on in every corner. Naomi's presence was treated like furniture, always there, never acknowledged. At school, he was louder. The hallway was his stage. Teachers recognized the last name. He didn't need to ask twice. He texted through morning meetings. Left wrappers behind without shame. And when his name was called during assembly, it wasn't because he earned it. It was because someone made a phone call. He wasn't cruel. Not with intention. He simply never paused to consider anyone beneath the surface. Especially the woman who mopped behind him. He had never needed to earn attention. Never had to apologize for being seen. And because the world had always opened its doors. He assumed it always would. But the floor he walked on every day was about to give him something money never had. A mirror. It rained that Thursday. The kind of steady, patient rain that soaks the ground without apology. By noon, the school floors had grown slick. Naomi moved slowly, placing yellow signs where her mop had just passed. Alex had come in late, shoes wet, voice louder than usual. He joked about the weather. Shoved lockers closed with his shoulder. Laughed as he turned the corner too fast. His foot met the water before he saw the sign. He hit the ground hard. Backpack scattered, elbow bruised. Gasps filled the hallway. Phones didn't rise. No one wanted to risk it. Naomi was closest. She stepped forward, steady, calm, and reached out with one hand. He jerked back like her touch burned. "Don't touch me, cleaner." The silence afterward was sharper than the fall. She didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just stood there, hands still out. Above them, a small red light blinked from the ceiling. One camera. One angle. One truth. Within hours, the principal had seen the footage. Paused it. Replayed it. Leaned back in his chair and said nothing for a full minute. By the next morning, there was a closed-door meeting. A folder on the table. A woman in a gray suit sitting beside Naomi, no uniform, no mop, just calm. Alex wasn't invited. But he was being written into a different kind of story. She arrived just after the first bell. No uniform. No cleaning cart. No mop in sight, not at first. Naomi stepped through the main entrance wearing heels that didn't rush, a coat that didn't hide, and eyes that held no need to explain. She passed students who barely noticed. Staff who had walked by her for months without learning her name. They looked up now. In the front office, she waited for the secretary to finish her sentence. Then calmly placed a folded document on the desk. It wasn't a complaint. Not a resignation either. It was ownership. A transfer signed long before she ever touched a broom. A decision made in silence. A name that had always been on the deed, hers. She slid the mop beside the paper. Turned without a word. And walked out of that building not as a cleaner. But as the woman who had watched long enough. It wasn't an announcement. No crowd. No camera. Just a quiet message delivered through the school's internal system. Alex, report to the library at noon. He entered slowly, unsure of what to expect. The room was empty except for 2 chairs, a table, and the mop he'd once stepped around without thinking. She was already there. She didn't ask him to sit. She didn't need to. He lowered himself across from her, restless hands now still. She nodded at the mop between them. "That's yours now." Not the handle. The history. He didn't respond. "There are things I can give you," she said, eyes steady, "but this? This isn't about money. It's about what you failed to see, and what I can't let you inherit blind. Before you inherit anything, a name, a house, a future, you must first recognize the value of what you've ignored. Know the value of work and people who gets things done." He looked at the mop. Not as a joke. Not as dirt. But as something he had never thought about until now. The weight of being unseen. For the first time, he didn't speak. He listened. But something in him shifted. Not because he was told, but because he finally noticed. Have you ever felt unseen, before anyone took the time to learn your truth? What would you have done, if you held the power to correct without shaming? Naomi never raised her voice. She never asked for credit. She gave him something far heavier than a lesson. She gave him a chance. Would you have done the same in her position? If this story made you pause. Share. Tap like. Hit subscribe. And come back for more stories.